Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about something that's totally fundamental to web accessibility, but somehow it still gets overlooked all the time: resizing text. And look, this isn't just some tiny technical detail. This is a rule that can literally decide whether your website is usable or completely useless to millions of people. All right, let's get right into it.
So I want to kick things off with a pretty direct question, especially for those of you who build stuff for the web. Is your website unreadable? Now, I know what you're thinking. Of course not. It looks awesome on my screen. But what if a huge chunk of your audience can't see it the way you do?
Because that's the reality we're dealing with. For literally millions of people with milder visual impairments, if the text on your site can't be scaled up, it might as well not even be there. It's a massive barrier that just locks people out of your content, your products, everything. So to really get this, we've got to step into the user's shoes for a second. Let's really dig into why resizing text isn't just a nice-to-have feature, but an absolute must-have. Here's the deal. We're talking about helping folks with low vision, people who might not be using a full-blown screen magnifier. For them, the browser's own zoom or text size feature is their main tool. It's their lifeline for navigating the web. It is literally the difference between them being able to read your article or just closing the tab in frustration. The good news is there's a really clear, official standard designed to solve this exact problem. It comes from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You probably know it as WCAG. And it's often called the 200% rule. 200%. This number is key. So what does it mean? It means that all the text on a web page has to be resizable up to twice its original size. That's width and height, using just the browser's controls. And, this is the important part, without the page completely falling apart. And here it is, the official rule itself, Success Criterion 1.4.4. It's super specific. Text has to scale up to 200% without loss of content or functionality. So what does loss of content or functionality actually look like in the real world? Well, the difference between a pass and a fail here is just night and day. A failure is a total mess. Text gets chopped off, it spills over other parts of the page, buttons become unclickable, forms are impossible to fill out. Success, on the other hand, is beautiful. The layout just adapts. All the content reflows smoothly into the space it has, and everything stays perfectly usable. Now, the rule covers almost everything, but there are two specific exceptions: captions that are part of a video and images of text. But I have to add a really important note here. Try to avoid using images of text whenever you can. Real text is always the better choice, because images just get pixelated and blurry when you zoom in, which kind of defeats the whole point, right? Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. Now let's get into the how. It really all boils down to understanding whose job is what. Think of it like a partnership. You've got the browser, the spec calls it the user agent. Its job is to provide those zoom and scaling tools. But then there's the developer, the author, and their responsibility is to build websites that don't fight against those tools. Your code needs to let the browser do its job. So how do you actually do that? Well, it pretty much comes down to three key things. First, use relative units. We're talking ems or percentages for your fonts and your containers, not fixed pixels. Second, build your layouts to be liquid or flexible so they can actually grow and shrink with the content inside. And third, and this is probably the most crucial step, test, test, test. Just open your browser, hit zoom, and crank it up to 200%. You'll spot any problems almost immediately. And to make that testing even easier, let's just quickly run through the most common ways that this can go wrong. Think of this as your what not to do checklist. So, the number one most common failure, officially known as F69, is when your text just gets cut off. This almost always happens when you've got a container with a fixed height or width. The text inside gets bigger, it hits that invisible wall, and poof, it's gone. It's a classic sign of a layout that's way too rigid. Next up, another huge one, failure F80. This is when the text labels on your buttons and your form fields get bigger, but the controls themselves stay the same tiny size. All of a sudden, they're unreadable and totally unusable. And just like that, your simple contact form is broken for a whole group of people. And here's a bit of a technical trap, F94. Sometimes, developers trying to be clever and responsive will use viewport units, like VW, for their font sizes.
But this can seriously backfire because it ties the text size to the size of the browser window, not the user's zoom setting. It basically disables the browser's ability to resize text for the user. Now, there is one tiny exception to the no cutting off text rule. Truncation is okay if, and this is a big if, the user can easily get to the full text. The perfect example is an email client. A long subject line might get cut off in the main list, but you can see the whole thing when you click to open the email. That's fine. Okay, let's zoom back out for a second and focus on the big picture here. What does all this mean for how we should be thinking about building for the web today? It all comes back to this one simple human-centered idea. We're not just trying to check a box on a compliance sheet. We are making a deliberate choice to make sure our words can be read by people who just need things a little bit bigger. It's really about the fundamentals of readability. So, what are the key things to walk away with? It's pretty straightforward. Build with relative units like ems and percentages. Design your layouts to be flexible so your content can reflow. Always, and I mean always, test your work at 200% zoom. And maybe most importantly, make readability a top priority for every single person who visits your site. And I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. You can have the most stunning design, the most brilliant, world-changing content, but really, what good is any of it if people can't even read it?